Welcome to Health Matters. Public health focuses on protecting the most vulnerable in our communities, and the Farmington Valley Health District has been fortunate to receive a grant from the Movember Foundation to focus on veterans' mental well-being in the Farmington Valley. With the help of the Movember funding and the support of the Prevention Institute, Farmington Valley Health District has launched Resilience Grows Here, an initiative that focuses on the mental well-being and resilience of veterans and their families across their lifespan. Resilience Grows Here works in our communities to connect veterans to peers, improve access to existing services, destigmatise mental health, and support veteran families within our communities. Today, we're joined with some members of the Resilience Grows Here Steering Committee. Jeff Sturgeon, a Navy veteran, Kim Rada from the Institute for Community Research, and Lee Wilson, Army veteran and a member of the VFW. Welcome everybody again to Health Matters. So Resilience Grows Here grew from the very generous donation from the Movember Foundation. And before we became the Resilience Grows Here that we are today, we did a year of research, and that was undertaken and led by Kim Rada from the Institute for Community Research. Kim, can you tell us a little bit about what we learned in that first year and how it's shaped who Resilience Grows Here is today?
Well, I think we knew from the very beginning that those of us that were members of the steering committee didn't have all the answers. Matter of fact, we had very few answers. And what we wanted to do was to make sure that the voices that were heard were the voices of veterans, of active service people, and also family members. So we spent a lot of time, matter of fact, that entire year doing one-on-one interviews, group interviews, large group sessions, where we asked people for their input. What were the challenges? What were the concerns? How they would describe the stigma related to mental health and mental illness, and where, if we were going to implement a program, where would be the best places to make connections with veterans, with active service folk. And so that was just tremendously important and really was the foundation and informed and continues to inform all the work that we continue to do.
You know, I think, and Kim, you and I both worked very closely in that first formative year, and I think we decided at the outset that, you know, these grant dollars are so precious and there are so many different services that exist for veterans. The worst thing that we could do would be to try to recreate the wheel, that really we needed to really listen to the population we were serving and recognise that, you know, veterans have unique challenges and veterans' families have unique challenges, and that needed to inform who we were and how we were going to develop the programs that we offered. I know that Jeff, you were with us from the very beginning, and Lee, you've come to Resilience Grows Here, you know, 12 months into our program. You know, how can you see that we've grown up since that very first 12 months to where we are today?
The program really has grown. I mean, we have a peer mentoring program, which was something that we talked about in that first year, and we're actually utilizing it. I've already had the opportunity to mentor 2 individuals, and you know, so looking at it from when we first started, we had all of these thoughts and these ideas, to see where we are now, where we're actually taking those thoughts and putting them into action. It's unbelievable. So, you know, I think that just with the work that we're doing, you know, we're really moving in the right direction. So this has really grown. It's really grown from an idea to where we're putting it into use. So it's a good thing.
And you know, Lee, when you came on board, you know, six months or so ago, you know, you are not only an Army veteran, but you also are a member of the VFW, and you've held many roles in the VFW. What attracted you to Resilience Grows Here? What makes Resilience Grows Here something different?
Well, the work you're doing, helping veterans, trying to have some of the veterans that are stuck with that stigmatism that if I say I have a problem, then they are all going to think I'm crazy.
Yeah. You know, I think one of the issues that we see time and time again is the general public think, well, the VA is a heavily funded organisation, and aren't they a one-stop shop for a veteran? How does that work, and why is that not necessarily always the case?
You've got to get the doctors and the nurses to listen to your problems instead of just making their decision of, well, this is what I think that you're wrong with you. I mean, I've been in pain for 26 years, and they just did an EEG to find out I have carpal tunnel in my ankles.
Wow, so it's taken all that time to diagnose something that you would think is a reasonably easy thing to fix, and that's put you in a position for many years where you've been in discomfort. But, you know, I can imagine that must feel like, you know, I've lived with this for so long, you know, why couldn't this have been picked up sooner? You know, I know, Jeff, that you have worked with a lot of veterans, and, you know, you've had a lot of experience with the complications in accessing services. You know, what are your views on this?
Well, I think that when we look at the healthcare for just civilians, I have my doctor, you have your doctor. We all have our own primary care physicians. And so you have multiple doctors, you have multiple places to go. When you're a veteran, you have the VA hospital. So you're taking all the vets in an area and bringing them into one place that I think just can't handle the amount of veterans that we have. So when you're trying to compare the VA with healthcare for civilians, it's night and day.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where a lot of things get lost. You know, I think that the VA is overwhelmed with the amount of people that are there. So it's nothing that's done intentionally, but it happens. And so I think that's part of the issue. And I think that with what we're looking to do is if we can now help veterans navigate through the system, you know, if they have someone there with them going into the VA with a clear-cut path, this is what we need to do. I think what we do is we eliminate a lot of that stress we put on the VA, because now it's not a guessing game, you know, like you had said.
But it also takes the stress off of the soldier.
Yeah.
Correct.
Because he's going to know what direction to go and what mistakes to help his primary care to avoid.
Yeah, you know, you make such a good point when we talk about the VA, because you add another layer of complication on top, because we have reservists and we have active duty, and they don't come under the VA. So we have Military One Source, we have vet centres, and, you know, for a population that have stepped up to serve our country, you then end up back in your homeland trying to navigate a system that doesn't make sense. And when you need assistance the most is when you're under the most pressure to try to work out who can see you. Unlike a civilian who just finds a cardiologist or a rheumatologist, suddenly there's all these additional layers that create stress and anxiety. You know, Kim, we found a lot of that when we did that year of research, didn't we? The angst.
We did, and I was just listening to both Lee and Jeff. I was thinking about some of the other comments that we heard, the tremendous frustration that men and women had accessing services, and they would reach a point where some of them would say, you know what, I'm out of here. I'm not going to do it any longer. And then what that does is create an even greater level of isolation, which is something that we are dealing with and that we heard a lot about as well. I think that first year for us also, you know, for some of us, we also, you know, thought, oh, well, you know, there's the VA and there are these services and you know, it's kind of one-stop shopping. And it was a year of learning, truly learning, for those of us that were part of the steering committee and part of gathering all of this kind of formative research and formative data to understand that that may not always be the case, and there are individual, personal, and systemic reasons why it's difficult to navigate that system. And it helped us to kind of gather that information so that we could put it together and begin to develop a trusting relationship with veterans and with active service folks, with reservists who we speak with a lot. And know that they can come and that the information is there kind of in a compact form, and that there's someone that's willing to help them navigate.
You know, I think one of the things that is so interesting, you mentioned the word trust, and I think in our initial year of research and definitely in our dealings as a steering committee, we hear this again and again about trust. We have placed men and women into a position of service where we trust them with the safety of our country, and they go and they do a job that only 1% of the population is prepared to sign up for. We instill in them, we place our trust in them and their ability to do the job that they've been trained for, and they do it to the most elite level. Then they come home, and I think there's a naivety in the sense that they think that that's just going to be returned in thanks for their service. And we're very good at saying thank you for your service, but it's what comes next. And I think we heard that again and again, that, you know, the words thank you for your service are nice, and it's good to think that people stop for a moment, but it's trusting that now that they're home, the 99% of us that didn't serve have got them, that we're there to help them. Our turn to serve has come. Right. And I know both of you, as veterans, have become very involved in our peer support program, and both of you have, a really active desire to be that person for another veteran. Why is it that a veteran is the right person for a veteran to speak to?
Well, I think number one, it goes to the experience. Mm-hmm. We can start right from the beginning and say we went to boot camp together. So we went into a program that they kind of strip you down of who you were and make you into what they need you to be. And so we can relate right from the very beginning, mm-hmm. of having that long hair, having it shaved, and then beginning the process. So right there is common ground. And the one thing we try to do as humans in our interactions is build that common ground. Why? Because when you start to do that, your guard kind of starts to come down a little bit. And that's where real communication can, begin. When you have someone who's never experienced that, they can't relate to it. And so no matter how hard you try, a lot of times, not always, nothing is absolute, but a lot of times they're not going to feel as comfortable with you as they would with someone who's been through that. So I think that, that's one of the biggest things we have with our peer mentoring.
The brother and sisterhood of being in the military makes it special.
Yeah, and I know, Lee, in your role in the VFW, you are such an incredible advocate. And in fact, I think what brought you and Resilience Grows here together, and now obviously you've become a member of the steering committee, is your desire to ensure that organisations like the VFW, which are already a formalised brotherhood, that the members within those organisations are better trained, that they understand how to be a peer. Being a peer, being a buddy is one thing, but being a peer is something very different. Recognising that you're there at a time when someone else is having a crisis, that you're there to be that stabilising force. Yep. Recognising that so many of our vets are at risk of suicide. I mean, 22 a day is the national number, and we know that doesn't even include reservists and those that are active duty. I mean, if we are losing that many veterans a day, we have to, as a society, have an obligation to step up as peers. Why do you think that engaging an organisation like Resilience Grows Here is so important for the VFW?
To help everyone understand that there's someone there for them instead of just being there because you have to. Yeah. You're there because you want to.
And I think that's very much the spirit, Kim, of Resilience Grows Here, is that here is this organisation that grew from an amazing, generous grant donation from the Movember Foundation, which is a foundation that specifically looks at men's mental health. And here we have gathered a group of people who, it comes from everybody's heart. It genuinely is almost their life's work in being a part of this. what else makes RGH special?
I think from the very beginning we were hearing what both of you have just said, that someone has been they have served, they were part of a brotherhood or sisterhood, as you said. Someone had your back. You had a mission.
Yeah.
And coming home, all of a sudden, you don't have that anymore.
Right.
You're coming home to a situation, and not being a veteran, I can only speak through the voices that I've heard, but they're coming back to a situation where if you haven't served, you're in a company of people who don't quite understand. They don't know how to ask the questions, what questions to ask. Should I ask? Does this person want to speak about their service? I don't have that camaraderie. I don't have that brotherhood, and I no longer have a mission. And one of the things having met with and done some interviews and conversations with some of our peer mentors is that, to me, that peer mentor program provides that reconnection in some ways, and it also provides and offers a mission. And not only that one program, but several of the other programs, actually all the programs. And the mission of Resilience Grows Here is to really foster that. And not to recreate something that you can never recreate, but to decrease isolation, to provide that trusting situation, environment, and maybe help to make the connections, whatever they are and at whatever place in time they need to be.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we've seen, because we do a lot of work with the 103rd Air Reserves out in East Granby, and here's another population that serve that are kind of like this subtype. They live with a foot in both worlds. I mean, we have men and women that are kind of like I think they've been termed the weekend warriors. They're the ones that come and they drill for a weekend, and they never know, am I going to get deployed, am I not? What kind of pressures does that put on someone? It's different to active service.
I have a friend right now that's probably getting deployed in May of 2019, and he's worked.
Yeah. It's, it puts pressures on a family as well. Yeah. Jeff, I know you've done a lot of work with the 103 as well, with establishing a peer mentor group out there. How do you see the challenges we have in servicing that community?
Yeah, that's a challenge, and it comes down to basically what we were saying here. Today I'm a civilian. This weekend I'm military. Come Monday I'm a civilian again. And so you jump in and out of character, really. You go from that being the civilian, you're not in that military mode, to being in the military mode. And then the unknown of, when are we going to get activated? Yeah. When are we going to be deployed? And what's going to happen with my family?
Right.
And that's, even though you sign up for that, until it happens, you're not really sure about that. When you actually go into active military service, you know what your role is for 4, 5, 6 years. In the reserves, it's not always the same, because you could be a reservist for 5 years and never get deployed. You could be a reservist for 4 months and be deployed. So, it's really, it's the unknown, I think, of when am I going to be deployed? Am I going to be deployed? And how does my family cope once I'm deployed? So I think that's the hard part about the reserves.
So that seems to be adding additional levels of stress on top of those that already exist.
And not knowing if you're going to get redeployed.
Right.
Yeah.
So fast. I mean, I know some of those guys have turned around and been gone again in a month. And they're there with their family and kids, and sorry, I've got to go again, and
And that's one of the things about this particular theatre of war, this era of war, is that America's been at war for 17 years, and much of America goes on as though nothing's changed. Unlike World War II and World War I, when it was really a whole world war and the whole nation suffered. The whole nation kind of fought alongside the men and women because, there were shortages and there was, metal drives, and everyone kind of had an active role. Now there's just 1% of the population, and again, as Lee said, you have these reserves that are often on rapid turnaround deployments. That didn't exist in World War I and World War II. You went, you served, you came home, and that was it. Now it's you're home, you touch home plate, and you're back again. You raised a really interesting point about families. I really want to spend a moment and just talk about what that means. What does service mean to a family?
That you're going to be gone, really.
Yeah. Instability. We know in our year of research that often it's a family that reaches out for assistance. The vet doesn't often believe they're worthy.
Well, the family, while the person is deployed, the family dynamic changes, the roles within the family change, and then, we've heard this, that when the service person, the serviceman and the woman returns, those roles have to change yet again, and how difficult sometimes that is.
Well, the person coming home has to change his perspective, and it's tough.
Yeah. And a point on that is it was something that we were talking about, Justine. You have a two-parent household a lot of times.
Yeah.
And you go from a two-parent household to a one-parent household. And everything falls on that one parent that's now there. Mm-hmm. Nothing is really split. So like if I go away, my wife is now responsible for cutting the lawn, shoveling the driveway. Everything that I would do now falls on her plate. Never mind everything else that she has to do as well. And so she becomes independent. She becomes that go-to person. The kids, mom, or dad, whoever's away. Once that member comes home, like you said, that dynamic changes, because now I want to take my role over as to what I was doing. And it's kind of hard because the person that was home has been doing that. And so I think we need to really look at that and understand that part of it as well, because that's very important. That's very important.
I think it's been said a number of times to me by different veterans that when we train you to deploy and when you deploy, you are deployed into a very controlled, regimented environment. You know what time you're getting up, you know what the guy in front of you is doing, you know what the guy behind you is doing. Everything makes sense because it's on military time. You come back into civilian life and none of that exists. There's no predictability. There's no understanding. The guy in front of you that you asked to do something and he doesn't do it, there's no consequences for that. So I think there's a saying that says, we teach people to deploy, we never train them to come home. We've created a situation in our active men in service that transitioning back home becomes an enormous challenge. Before we finish up, I just wanted to touch on suicide prevention, and I know our families often ask us, what can they do to better prepare? How can they be more aware? Why is suicide prevention training so important, and why is the role that RGH has there so vital to our families?
You show us what to look for to prevent it.
Yeah.
You get the what are the signs that someone is contemplating suicide?
Yeah.
And that's huge, because if you know the signs, you know what to look for. And if you don't know what to look for, that's when problems happen. So I think that's the great part about teaching everybody, teaching the community, this is what you need to know. So
And how to get them the proper help and guidance.
Correct.
And not being scared of asking the question. I mean, that's one of the things that, as a society, suicide is such a taboo topic, but, you know, it's something we need to get comfortable with. The same way you ask somebody and say, hey, you look like you got a fever. You know, have you seen the doctor lately? We're good at doing that.
Yeah.
We're great at, you know, picking up melanomas on people's faces, but we're not so good at really looking beyond the surface and saying, hey, you know, something's not right. Are you okay? You know, what do you need from me?
But we could be afraid of losing that friendship if we push it too far. You know?
Yeah, and I think that's part of what the suicide prevention training does, is it helps us to understand that by asking that question, we are never going to make somebody who isn't suicidal.
Right.
And if somebody is, you offer them an opportunity to be heard, that somebody sees them, that somebody actually is there and says, man, I can see you're in pain. How do I help? Because we also know that a suicidal ideation is not a permanent state. We know that it's transient. So, as always, there's never enough time. We could talk about this forever, and I would love if maybe you'd come back on another series. We can talk more about the needs that families have. So thank you to our guests today for helping us to better understand the needs and challenges faced by our veterans, our active service members, our reservists, and of course our families that live within our community. Only 1% of the population step up to serve our nation, but they and their families make an enormous sacrifice to do so, and one that does not end when their deployment finishes. If you want more information about Resilience Grows Here, please feel free to look for us at resiliencegrowshere.org, or you can find us on Facebook. And of course, the Farmington Valley Health District can be found at www.fvhd.org, and once again on Facebook. Thank you to our viewers at home for joining us, and if you too have served your country, thank you for your service. Until next time, remember, your greatest wealth is your health.